Hello and welcome to this video, and I have with me someone that doesn't need introducing, a real legend of the drums, a legend of jazz. I'd like to welcome to my channel Mr. William E. Cobham Jr. Lovely.
Pleasure to be here, Andrew.
So
Nice to.
you've been on your Spectrum 50 tour
Mhm.
this at the moment. Can you tell me a little bit about the band you've got? Who's in the band?
The band is morphing. The band as it is. And I'll start with the one guy who's been with me uh, for a long time, on and off in many different bands with me, and that's Michael Mondesi. He's the bass player. Even though for this past month or so, I didn't use Mike. I was working on. I'm working on a project where in Panama, the country where I was born, that presents me. I'm, for lack of a better term, the godfather of the Panama Jazz Festival coming January. So from January 15 until January 19, it's me every day, except for one day when we have to make the transition from one venue to another. I'm rehearsing, so it doesn't matter. Every day, it's for 5 days. I'm working either with the Spectrum 50, with Michael Mondesi, Gary Husband, playing keyboards, and Rocco Zeffirelli. It's from Italy, from Rome, on guitar. And we're kind of pushing a lot of the old stuff and a few different new bits and pieces as a quartet. Then midweek, that's on a Monday. And on Wednesday, I playing a project with Danilo Perez on piano, and Alex Blake, who was my original bassist in the original band with Randy Brecker and John Abercrombie and Michael Brecker and everybody back in 1974. And he's also from Panama, so he and Danilo and the three of us, and we're Trio de Panama, it's called, and we play there. I want us to play, and we'll be playing music from the three of us. The next night in the same venue, the second venue, it is me with the Global Jazz Orchestra, which is East Coast people from Panama, are playing about 17-piece big band of my portfolio of music. But the music has been orchestrated by Guy Barker, who's also a Londoner, and orchestrated most of my music for big band, from 15, 17 pieces hit band to 22-piece. Was it the jazz? Yeah, it was Frankfurt Radio Orchestra, Jazz Orchestra, and coming up would be a 63-piece presentation next November with the BBC Orchestra, where we have the strings and blah, blah, blah. We'll do that. So we're going to bring some of the stuff to the Latin stuff that I've written that's I've been influenced by in my home, to Panama for the first time, because most Panamanians have no idea who I am. They know Ruben Blades, they know an American baseball player named Mariano Rivera, who played for the New York Yankees, and he's their big hit. And then, of course, Danilo, who runs the Panama Jazz Festival. So there's that. Being me kind of formally introduced to the general public there, and not just the intelligentsia. So we'll see how that works.
How much do you remember of Panama? Because I think, did you leave it at 5? Was it 5
I
years?
left at 3 years old.
How much do you remember of it? Is it like a strange to go back? You have this deep collective memory.
Oh no! I then I returned 50 years later or something like this. I returned in 2004 or 2005, for the first time since, and I did I had an appearance on the Panama Jazz Festival that summer, and it was kind of nice, but nothing that I was writing home about until we went back to the city where I was born, which was not Panama City, but Colon. And then I found I felt like I just returned home, you know.
Strange, isn't it?
It was a very interesting feeling, you know, a prodigal son-esque kind of thing, you know, standing on the outline, the foundation of the hospital where I was born that doesn't exist anymore, you know, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I feel like I've been here. Certain things would just come to mind, you know. So it from there it's like, yeah, maybe I should stay here a little bit. And then next thing you know, we found the possibility of an apartment, not in Cologne, but in Panama City. And that place is now our home. You know, it's been that way for, you know, almost 15 years now, you know. Very cool. But again, it's still a learning process. It's like having left the United States in 1979 or 80, something like that, with the intention of playing a tour, which I did do. When that tour was done, I thought I'd just hang around Europe to see what it really was like, because I had some time off. And next thing you know, it was supposed to be 3 months, and 3 months became 6 months, and 6 months became 6 years. And, you know, wife, divorce, blah, blah, boom, you know, I'm here, can't leave, you know, this is it, you know, and I'm still trying to figure out which end is up here, but it works. It works nonetheless.
Going back to the Spectrum compositions, the amount of times I've sat in a club and someone's pulled Red Baron or Stratus out to play, they have almost become jazz standards. And I think in our real book, we've got Red Baron. So I would love to talk to you about the process of you writing those tunes, because of course you're a composer.
Yeah.
And, you've written, because the Spectrum album seems to pull everything together for fusion and jazz to come. So how did you perceive those compositions? How did they happen? I assume you wrote them whilst you were in Mahavishnu. So,
well, yeah, but I wasn't writing any. I wrote this music out of desperation. By the time I wrote Spectrum and Red Baron, I knew that I was being released from Mahavishnu Orchestra. And the big problem for me was that I knew that in New York City, where I was living, I was brought up, it's a very fast town. Nothing in comparison today of what it was back then. Because literally, man, you could go to a studio and there would be people sitting waiting to see if they're going to have to be called to take your place in your presence. I mean, it's like there were musicians, accomplished people sitting in a bar around the corner, one called Jim and Andy's, where lots of studio musicians hung out, and they had students. In case they couldn't make a date, they had all the parts covered, you know. If they felt that they had a good, that they were mentoring someone that they could depend on, timing was very important. Discipline was very, very important. Not just being able to play the instrument, of course, but when the phone call came in through the answering service, that was all these phones inside the bar, was a great set for a movie. Somebody waiting to get work, knowing this the right cast. The story was just the general story. It could be, it's like a cattle call for actors rehearsals and blah blah, what they call them, when they have to see if they can read a part. Same thing, you know. And so what happened next? You get a call, and they said, you know, it's just this is Grady Tate's looking for Billy Cobham, say, for hypothetically, which happened a few times. And I said, this is Cobham, and said, okay, you're a Jim, so Jim and Andy, so can you make it down to Phil Ramon's place on 48th Street? It's 10 blocks down the road. To take Grady's trap cases there, take that, George. Grady's got the other trap case, and he's up at the solo studio, and he's not going to make that jingle right away. Go there, and they'll tell you what to do, and this is how you get into the studio. if you do what you're told to do, and they're telling you, they know that you play drums, so they're not telling you that the date starts hypothetically at 10 o'clock, and so you have to be there at 10. That's obvious. In order to play at 10, you have to be there at 9, so you could set up to play at 10. And so you tend to get into this habit. So a lot of these bad problems of being late just don't exist, because if you play at 10, that means you have to be there at 9. If you play at 9, you have to be there at 8. So that means you prepare all the way along the way. You keep doing that for a few weeks, and next thing you know, people are calling you and say, "Are you available for this, or are you available for that?" And that's their thank you. That's the thank you you get. Never, "Man, you sound good." When you get, "Man, you sound good," chances are you're not going to play again. Yeah, Billy. Yeah, that was great. Big mistake. That phone will never ring when that happens. And you learn these kind of things. So um coming out of the orchestra, I never wrote a note of music for the Mahavishnu Orchestra. It was all John stuff. I was so comfortable playing that stuff, but then came how can I put it, the poison that goes into bands, when they're pitted against each other. And it's just, musicians are very, very, in my opinion, very, very sensitive. If they love what each other's, and they have respect for each other, it doesn't have to be love it, but I personally had the deepest respect for the music that John had written for that project, for the first project. So I was comfortable with it. But there were some other cats, it was Jerry and Jan, who liked it too, but they wanted more. They wanted to, now they were so influenced, they wanted to write like John. And so one's a string player, okay, violin. The other one's a keyboard player who had taken keyboards at that point in time to a completely different dimension and level, and started to emulate the guitar. So with Jan, you had primarily Mini Moog, Oberheim, and these effects and all. Very unique. And I was really a big fan of his because he saw that in the environment in which he was playing, he was just a minor player on that instrument, because in those days, the old guys were, Hank Jones, Errol Garner, George Shearing, and Bill Evans, and it would just go on and on and on with all these piano players who were insane. And then the next generation was McCoy Tyner and Herbie Hancock, and I mean, again, it was like through the roof. Chick Corea, his contemporaries. So he thought, well, what would happen if I did this? And he started to really tinker with Bob Moog's Mini Moog. Take that on the road. Nobody was doing that. Not really. The doors were just opening up, and he was so comfortable in it that he then started to emulate, I think, all out of pure respect, whatever John was playing on guitar. Problem is, I learned over years is that it takes a long time for guitar players to play all that stuff that they play on guitar. They have to memorize a lot of the fingerings and all of these things. And for me, in a way, playing the drums, I have a rudimentary procedure that I pursue. So it's like, of course, I gotta, if I'm going to play a round cue here, or I'm going to play a triplet here, or I'm going to treat this rhythmic pattern more in a duple way, and I'm going to phrase. That's all there already, and that's my sandbox in which I work in, and I can expand and contract as long as I stay in those parameters. Guitar players, man, are trying to find ways to reinvent themselves. It seems to me like every note, there's got to be this sound effect or this effect or that effect, or and you're just going, okay, now I get it. And Jan just tweaks a couple of knobs and boop, 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 boop. This sine wave replaces that sine wave. It's a square sine, it's a rectangular, it's a sawtooth, it's pink noise, all combined, and then plug into an effect. And boy, what you got. It's pretty interesting. And then of course, he controls the reverb, echoes, all of this. At some point in time, John got very upset, and rightly so, because he has a platform, and it's becoming more and more narrow, and then you're throwing in. He's playing a tremendous amount of notes per bar, and it's all there. It's hovering around every chord change and the things that he's written, which were quite unique, because not just were they melodically and harmonically unique, but we were playing a lot more than bands like Dave Brubeck in 9 and 5. We were doing 13s and 21s and God knows what else, And so I'm where I stand is that I receive all of this information and I'm filing it away unknowingly, just naturally, because I'm still a Latin player, and everything I'm hearing is phrased in either 4 or 3 with a little bit left over, and that's how I'm looking at it. And knowing that it's like a loop. It's just going da 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 da. What's going on? So okay, it's 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 1 2 3 4. That means you have to throw that in somewhere. But there are alternatives and to that pattern that one can play, as long as it lines up with what everybody else is doing and where you play it. It's so important. If it's symmetrically cool, generally in Western music, making alternate changes or alternate rhythmic patterns work, coming at around every 4, 8, 16 bars, or even 32 bars. But you don't have to count the bars. You'll feel it if you know the melody, if you understand the melody, if you understand harmonically how the form is, and that helped me to separate myself in terms of concept from many other players, because most drummers back then were rhythmicists. If they got that far, they were not thinking about the form of the music. They could not sing the melody, or much less hear the changes and the transmutations of anything. They would just want to play strongly and keep everybody in sync. Cool. More work for me. Yay. The thing is, it was important though to understand that not just to have a whole bunch of drums that looked like that they had to be hit, and all of them sounded fundamentally within the same pitch region for dimension of the drum. So if you had an 8, it sounded like an 8 thud. It was just a lighter thud than the 10. But if you tuned it and you got a tonal character from each drum, that meant that you could actually change those tonal characters. They're not going to hold tune perfectly. But if you're hearing that, eventually you will play in a certain way to bring out an implication of the tonal character of the music from the drum set. So nothing really new about that. It's just that it was not done, except in communal drumming by hand drummers in other continents in the world, and had been done for God knows how, for endless years. So now we're doing it in a drum set. New monsters rear their heads, of course, but that's what life's all about. It's yin and yang. So you learn as you go along, you make your adjustments, and you work with what you understand. Again, a rarity amongst players. Once they're used to just staying down and supporting.
It's incredible that you're you're bringing these things in, because from my perspective, I started drumming in 1980 without a drum kit. My dad had some sticks because he'd play, and I found these drumsticks, and I started to listen to all the rock albums that I was listening to back then. And my mom said, there's a drummer on the TV tonight, Andrew. He's called Billy Cobham. And this had happened about 2 weeks after I started playing the drums. You did for BBC Two, the clinic with the guy from Shakin' Stevens and Nick, and I think it was Nick France on drums too.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
And so I'm just starting playing the drums, and I'm just about getting my 4/4 beats down, and I videotaped this, and I watched it over and over and over, and those concepts in there I just pulled out, and I went out and got an album by you, Crosswinds. The track Flash Flood completely bemused me, and I've always said my college was Flash Flood and trying to work out what the hell you were doing on that track, which was in 1716, and the revolutionary way in which you carve time up, and the melodicism, and the sort of, I always said it's additive time. You play from within. And then I can remember watching an interview with you, and I'd really got this from this thing that you said that when you play the drums, it's like having a delicious meal, and you take the sound from the drums. This, I feel, is so important and has influenced me. But could you explain a little bit more about that as a concept, of feeling the drums like this rather than like that?
Yeah, so what we're talking about is that we sit, first and foremost, it's your posture that dictates how you approach playing the drums, rather than try to beat the sound out of the drum. So you're hitting the top head, and the bottom head is vibrating, and the sound is coming out that way. You're drawing and stinging the sound. If you're playing in the center of each drum, it's tuned a certain way, so only one tonal character or two that you want to play will be in harmony with each other, but relate to what everybody else is playing. So it makes it easier for you to play. If you have a very sensitive and consistent working technician, if you need to hear yourself in relationship to the band, that's a gift. You get somebody like that, all of a sudden you're playing, and it's so easy to play. You don't have to play the drums hard because you're drawing the sound out. And that's, your energy is going in the negative, not in the positive. Drawing away, stinging, hitting the drum, boom, 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 boom. So you just, it's almost like watching Muhammad Ali, float like a butterfly and sting like a bee, that kind of feeling. So you're floating over the drums, and you're only drawing the sounds out that you want. And the cymbals the same way. So you never crack a cymbal. You rarely break a head. Do you play the heads until they are just dead? Then you just want to replace them with new heads.
Where did this come from, Billy? Where did you have this knowledge?
Because I used to work for Ali, and his approach in the play that we were working on, that he produced, it's called Big Time Buck White, and it was at the Winter Garden in New York, was to talk about how he fought and what he did. This is
incredible stuff. Well, Ali, that's where you got it from.
Sure.
Yesterday
that makes a lot of sense, man. He doesn't go into the hit somebody, boom, crack. No, not until it's necessary should he ever do that. And he's always on his toes. He's always coming out of a situation. So he's always like this, and this hand is always blocking. That goes here, boom here, boom here. So it's like, and it works. The same thing as the drum set. So you're playing, and everything is just the drums start to continue to vibrate the heads. So then it becomes important for the bottom head, which is the resonant head, to resonate at a specific frequency that's relative to the top head. And that decides whether when you hit the top head, whether the drum is going to be dampened more, or it's going to sing more, depending on the resonant head on the bottom. You know, so you can go bop, 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 because it's tightened on the bottom too much. But as soon as you tighten out to loosen, you bop, 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 there's your tone. And you decide what kind of quality sound you want there.
I feel like you're talking about something so fundamental to creativity as well. It's the ability to react in a relaxed way. I was originally a painter, and I can remember my old teacher said, he goes, when every brushstroke you make should be like an animal, like a squirrel jumping from branch to branch.
Right.
Life depends on it, but you have to do it relaxed. I've got a friend, massive music fan. He's a guy called Ron Hall, and he was a martial artist in films. He worked with all sorts of different people. A real legend of martial arts. And I was speaking to him yesterday about this, and I told him what I got from you from that interview about taking, and he went, that is exactly the same as martial arts. And then we get to talk together the next day, and you bring up Muhammad Ali, and it goes around full circle. It's incredible.
That's where it's been for me. And you combine Ali with the likes of Vic Firth, Louis Bellson, and those are two musicians who also wrote for orchestra. Okay, I mean, Louis has masses that he wrote for, you know, actual religious a mass with choral and all of this. He was a great concert composer, and of course, a big band. He wrote a lot of material that he played with the Tonight Show big band, and directed them just from the drum set. You know.
Well, I was going to ask you about Louis Bellson in this interview. One of my questions, because you know, my dad being a big band fan, and I used to listen to so much stuff by Louis, and then you know, then when I got into you, I could hear parallels, very close parallels, you know, between you and Louis Bellson, and I've always wondered
because I studied with him, and he got me to do this, yeah, you know, so it's this in this hand, and that's what I do now on stage. I play with 4/6. So it's this concept of playing. So now it's a question of focus. When you use this concept, this approach at Louis, he is not just drawing the sound out of the drum, but playing and controlling the how can I say, the width between the sticks as you play this way. You know, so it's like this way, or as this is going this way, you're doing this. And you're playing in combination different drums at the same time. So it's 4 drums going, but you're multitasking, you're playing 2 against 3. And so you're focusing on not only that, but where the sticks fall on the drum, because the purest sound is in the center. So you're still having to draw the sound out. So it's a lot of things to think about. So all of a sudden, speed is not anywhere near as important as accuracy. And focus on what you play, when, how it's going to enhance the other 2 sounds, because you have a 4-beat chord or arpeggios that you're playing on the drum set. How did you set your drums up to do that? What tones were you looking for at the time? You know, all these kinds of things then start to come to the surface, and you go, okay, let me stop and think about this, think this through, because there's still 2 other things happening at the same time. It's 4 on the floor with the bass drum, and the hi-hats on 2 and 4 all the time. That's keeping your tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's da do do dee do dee da do dee do 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 da dee do da dee do da dee do. Each hand.
When I listen to so many of your solos, you have a sort of ostinato approach where you will have the feet providing something, and then you play over the top. And that was one of the things I recognized that Louis Belson was doing. I mean, Max Roach gets the credit, doesn't he? Of course.
I don't know about that, but I know with Louis it was. But this is where Max didn't play multi grip. He did not do that. What he did do was that he focused on one instrument in the drum set, which is very unique for him, and the patterns were basically the same all the time. So he said, and he just have a hi-hat by itself. Okay, cool. But his point that was making is that the drummer never had, it doesn't have to be in the back of the band or to the side or something less than everyone else. Okay, so we're talking about who gets the acknowledgement. About the music, though, where would the drums fit optimally the best place? And it will be with the rhythm section. If you have to push that bass player, and if it's in a big band and there's a guitar player who's playing chink, 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 you better be there with them because they can only do with so much. And what happens then is that the drummer becomes kind of a carpenter or a cabinet maker because wood is much stronger or more resilient and projects quicker. So therefore, you're going to have the drums with nails and everything set up specifically for that set in a certain way all the time, so that when you come in, boom, you put down, that's your platform, the drums go where they're supposed to go, and lo and behold, you get a big sound because it's the same sound all the time. Sometimes you're in a room that you may need to have some dampening, you put a rag on top to cut down. So you tend to find all these different little things that will help you to be more to contribute more in a more significant way than if you just come and you just play and you look like you're going nuts. Okay, great. And then what after that? And what about the music? And how does the music work together? A great example for me in terms of that kind of approach concept is that when working with Peter Gabriel, we were playing. I think we had a concert at Nürburgring or something like this, a huge Formula One track. So we were 1.5 miles on the track away from the stage, which meant that we had to in a London cab get on the road that the racetrack in a London cab that went like a derby, was like floating on because it was so high off the road, and we could only do this beautiful road went down into the area. We couldn't drive past 30 kilometers per hour because the thing would roll over. It wasn't designed for Formula One.
Yeah.
But as we're coming slowly to the audience, it's chained off. So of course, first we only see the back of the audience, and they're like slammed up. It's 85, 100,000 people. It's spit in the corner, of this thing. And we come around the bend and people, I'm just passing these people, and there's people, and they just stop. And there's almost no air to breathe, no place to move. And we get finally to the stage. As we're getting closer to the stage, there's a rock and roll band from Brazil. This is 1994. And the bass drummer, the band's playing, and I'm going, gosh, how do you play to 100,000 people? I mean, what I play with Pete, I mean, I'm coming from I think I was coming from, I can't remember what tour I did before I had to go with Peter, but I knew I was going out after, immediately the next day after we finished, wherever that was, I had to fly to the United States and open with Stanley Clarke on tour. And so I was back to my fusion thing. By then I understood the difference because I heard this drummer and I came on the back of the stage, and I'm hearing him going. First and foremost, the band's playing, and he's just saying, "Bap, da 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 da," and that's all he could do. The drumsticks were maybe parade 3S, something like that. And he's playing for all he's worth. I mean, God bless him. He's pulling no punches, man. I'm going, Jesus, how? And then he goes into this thing where his bass drums start to go. What I didn't know was that Korg, I had a Korg a Korg, like a electric pad that you X something or other, and you could play it and get sound. It could not do a loop.
Yeah.
So there was a technician. I mean, I'm watching this guy's hair going up. And his hands are up in the air, and he's going like this, and he's like, I can't hear him. And then I see a lot of hair going. It turns out to be and sticks down below his riser. And there's a guy playing the bass, playing this electric thing. And I just come up to him, and the guy's, and I'm looking at him. Surely you're joking, right? And finally, I look at the drummer, and the drummer is just kicking him and saying, "Stop, stop! Now we have to stop." And it's all of that. But I realized that this was in the years where people were running into each other and banging and crashing into each other in front of the stage, and they were dancing or some kind of. I was in the league on totally new to me. I had no idea what went on behind the scenes, and that we were on I think the act before us was Aerosmith. This act was really earlier in the day. I was just walking around looking, I was learning, wow, this is what's going on back here. And Aerosmith was real on the money, and some other band. It was amazing what was happening, man, with the drummers, how they played. 50 meter stage wide, guy running back and forth singing. I was a student. I was so amazed that, man, what artists do. No wonder. I mean, Jagger was always in shape, always pumping, trying to just get through the day.
I've done those gigs too, Billy, and I can remember doing one huge gig in Portugal. They counted us. They said you got to get on stage, and I remember starting to walk to the kit, and I realised if I walked, it was going to take me about 2 minutes to get across the stage. So you're running, and then you're on, and then everything's got to be as big as possible. There's no subtlety.
It's gotta be. Yeah. I mean, it was like, for me, it was a learning experience. Incredible. And the fact that a lot of the things that I was used to playing as fills sounded like, because it was so far away.
Yeah.
Nobody knew. And then I got seasick from seeing so many people. My brain just went, what? Everything was going like this, you know?
Yeah, because you actually get aware of this sound. You hit the drum and your sound goes out. And if you're playing a beat, they're not jumping down this. It's this wave of whoa, don't.
I didn't expect it. I was like completely out of my element, man. I was like, holy shit. Really? You know, really? And I went, okay, all due respect. Now I get it. You know, you guys, it's a whole other world. I had to ask myself, do you really want to do this? I don't think so, you know, and not that then the problem was I would have done it. That was the year that they revisited Woodstock in '94. And Peter had to do Woodstock, but he only agreed to do it the day before I had to leave. And I had this commitment to do the tour. If I had nothing else going, I would have, the route that I took in music would have changed, and I would have just stayed with Peter. I was having such a great time, you know, with Tony Levin and all. It was an amazing experience for me. Really necessary. to better understand what was happening in music, period, on many levels, business-wise, also. It was insane, insane. But and understanding how to negotiate with general public. Well, I mean, we played Paris. You couldn't buy a ticket to this. I mean, it was so, I don't know how many 100,000 people we had somewhere, Place de la Concorde, I think something like this. Come on. There was no place to go. We had to walk, I think, to walk 10 blocks, the band, without anything, without we were faster than the bus to get to the hotel across the street from the stage. I mean, there was no, it was jammed with people. Gendarme, there wasn't enough gendarme to even make a dent. You know, it was just off the hook, man. And I was just like, my God, what happens if fire, or where did we go? What do we do? We had a concert that started at 8. We tried to get there at 2. We finally arrived and from on the other side of town, it is from by the Champs-Élysées, there was a hotel the band stayed. I mean, Place de la Concorde can't be more than 2 miles away. It took us 2 hours to get there from the hotel. And we had it took us an hour and a half or so to get there to that point where we were, and then a half an hour to walk to the hotel, which was directly across the street from there. There's something still be like this. I'm going, I had never experienced this in my life. I don't know if I really want to do this again. One time was cool.
Rock and roll's a different thing, and the great rock and roll drummers, they're virtuosos, but in a completely different way. It's just a different, and a lot of the guys I know who are working in pop music now, they're just playing straight four all the way through, but they're having to control the light show with their drums.
Yes.
And when I hear this, I'm like, oh, you know, because I'm old school, you know, I just want to set my drums up and play. It's the world that drumming moves on, you know, but I feel you lose as much as you gain. And, you know, that I think your generation, the things you did musically, the openness that you were allowed to push the music forward is a golden time in art music.
Yeah, I would love to do it again. It was just so heavy, man, so heavy. The commitment is got to be full. Very difficult. There was so much that I learned, and so much that from not being able to do and not being prepared for. I mean, I just didn't know what was coming. It's like nothing ever before. Again, I understand also the fact that it's not so easy for Pete to write, continually let the music flow. It's just like this stuff it's got a life of its own when it comes out. It's amazing to have been part of that.
When you write, are you thinking of your and that your drumming is going to go on the track, or do you then write the tune and then go, right, then you treat it like someone else's composition and go, well, what would be best? Because I think of, you know, I mean, one of the first albums I ever bought was Crosswinds, and Heather is such a beautiful composition, and I often don't think you get the credit for the composer that you are, despite the fact that you've written so many well-known, you know, and sampled tunes. Well, you know, how do you conceptualize a tune like Heather? It's such a beautiful...
First, I write music. I mean, I'll hear a melody, you know, ba-bi doo da doo da, and I use Sibelius a lot. So I'll just sit down. So I don't need a piano or anything. Much of my work is coming just from here directly to the computer, to writing the notes in 5 spaces and lines and spaces, and that's it. You know, 5 lines, 5 spaces, and I'm just writing. Choosing a key, I'll choose a key, okay? And then right within the realm of that key, whatever I hear as it comes, you know, it's kind of linearly.
How did how did you develop that skill? Because it's like, you go into the studio, you write, you do Spectrum, it becomes one of the most important jazz albums or fusion
You
albums.
understand?
It's not like you had to build up to it and get there.
No, but and then I didn't have Sibelius.
How
I,
did you
I
do
had
it?
had a piano. I played chord, maybe two fingers. I was terrible at playing piano, and I went to music. And I mean, like this, so but I played my mallet. It's all. I just heard the harmonies, so I just play the chords. And I just play, and that works. Okay, just write this down, mistakes and all, and then make the adjustments. Thank God for erasers. And refit with a pencil. Had a big box of pencils. Go for it. Yes, you're going to make mistakes. That's how you learn. They're your best teachers.
Mm.
It's not a put down. It's I wanted this, but I got this. No, that's not quite it. And slow process. Don't be in a hurry. It could take a while. But if you learn from what those mistakes are, they're no longer mistakes. And they might be an indication of where you could go as you become more sophisticated as a writer later. It's on you, So everything it's open season. It's up to you to do. I mean, I heard Kali Yuta wrote some things way back. When I heard the recordings of it, I went, gosh, that's dark. But then at the time, knowing Vinny and how Vinny was, he just wanted, he got this feeling of just wanting to be left alone. Like he said, he was in a dark place. And so his writing was,
Yeah, it's an incredible album, that is. I know
I'm
exactly what
going,
you mean.
ooh, where are we going with this?
Well, they're
And
artists. It's you, Vinny, all these are artists first and foremost. I mean, there's so many incredible technicians. I can't get my head around it now. These kids coming out on Instagram and they've got their rehearsed lick and they do it, and you go, oh my God, that's incredible. But
it's a whole other thing.
yeah, it's a different
It's
thing.
not just licks. We're speaking. That's why I said linearly. I'm telling a story. I'm hearing something. It was like I'm trying to reflect on an image of a true image of me that I experienced of a young person when I was working in collaboration as a consultant for UNICEF in Brazil, in Santos. And I met a little guy, no more than 14 or 15 years old. And he could hardly speak English, but he was smoking almost completely cut off what was left of a cigarette stub or cigar stub. He can say, you give me 1,000 cruceros, I not promise nothing happened to your car. And looking down at this and I'm going, it's a little urchin, What do you mean? What would happen to the car? You give me 1,000 cruceros, nothing happened to your car. Money, 1,000 cruceros then was worth was 675th part point of a dollar, a US dollar. So 675,000 cruceros made $1 and he wanted 1,000 cruceros. And so I said to him, okay, man, you got it, but I have only $1. He looked, his eyes went, ooh. And then all of a sudden, out of the bushes comes the rest of the family, 14, 15 years old, right? 2 children at 14 or 15, babies. The girlfriend, little Katie, she was 16. She already had 2 children by him. And they were trying to survive on 1,000 cruceros, man. The influence, the visual, putting that into context musically, I started to come up with this melody. I started hearing it. Next thing you know, I made a recording of it. And it's all just writing, sitting down in a hotel room and listening to that and putting the changes together and testing. Next thing you know, our time goes by. It is not, when we play, it is not about, we need to do this right away. It's got to happen. Either it's going to happen fast or slow. Time just becomes relative to whatever you have to do. And it just happens, it flows. If, for me, that's the way it goes. Next thing you know, I could be finished with that, maybe for the day, for the month. There's nothing else coming for it. I'm composing. I'm not a machine. Leave it. More comes later. And start writing something else. That's always the way I've been. So it's very easy for me to just accept what I have and work with that until I feel it's correct to share with my colleagues in performance, or to share with the audience as you know, in a good solid play. You know, and that's a tune. It's called Eggshells Still on My Head, and that the reason is because these kids were they could have been born in an ostrich egg, man. They were so small, you know. And they're smoking cigars already, you know, and trying to take care of the kids. I mean, and in that period of time, that was a period where there was a lot of child molestation going on. They were trying to find ways to earn money. They were coming from families that had no room in them because the children just kept being born. When the men came home, or whoever was there, they just stayed in cinder block huts, you know, favelas. And if there wasn't enough room, they were kicked out. They had to go and fend for themselves. They would live outside, rain or shine, you know, and try to make it, but the best they could. And, you know, working there, reality, serious reality, you know. And so, again, inspiration, just by seeing the surroundings, you go, wow. Not
It's what art and music does, isn't it? Fundamentally, that's what it
yes.
does, isn't it? That's what we're all here for, is to try and express how we feel about the
I
world.
guess so.
And
Yeah, and the thing is it's like you look, you see, and all of a sudden the image, especially for me, photography, I carry a camera most often, and those images I try to turn into, not all the time that am I successful, into a sonic uh, image, instead of something I see, something I hear, you know. And that to me is the relationship between the sound and video and vision.
it's fascinating.
Mm.
I on Facebook, I think it might have been Gary Husband posted a photograph up of you with John McLaughlin and Steve Gadd backstage a few days ago.
Mhm. Mhm.
A beautiful thing for me to see. I'm a big Steve Gadd fan, but it was lovely
Mhm.
to see you arm in arm with John. I noticed
Mhm.
you got your arms interlinked. So,
Mhm.
you know, how do you, when you meet John, do you discuss your legacy, or what's your relationship there now? You know, looking back on what you did, which really changed the world as far as I'm concerned.
Um, it's something we just did. I don't. Nothing can be foreseen. Um, with John playing with him, he invited me to give him a hand with some material that he had some ideas. I mean, when you see with a little spiral back notebook that he had, which was it was like a little tiny black book like this, but it was yellow. And I remember this so well because I said, "What is in that?" You know, I thought, "Oh, he had some music and he wanted me to play." Huh. He says, "Okay, what do you think about this?" And he started playing. He said, "What could we put? What could you put behind this line?" And so we started playing. He didn't even count off. He just boom, and it just sort of started to fall. He said, okay, now where we go from here? And once these little modules started to connect, we had a groove that cut right straight through. And so he'd go back and he'd remember. We go back
It all
about
started
10
off
days.
just you and John, wasn't it? It was just you and John.
It was us in duet for about 10 days. And then within that 10-day period, towards the end of the 10 days, Jerry Goodman showed up. And then Jan Hammer showed up. And then Rick came finally. And so remembering all of that, carrying those lessons around for the rest of my life, it was easy to just lay things down. And the first, how can I say, lesson or idea to present is one of stability. If it's going to be a shuffle, and as long as that stayed stable, there were a lot of different things that could happen on it. And we were at a point in time where all those patterns were repetitive. So people got used to this odd kind of feeling that we're in our environment in which we work. And that's what set us off from a lot of other artists, where in some instances we were opening, let's say, for a real pop star kind of guy, I forget, and he was a closing act at the Beacon Theater in New York. And in the middle of us and them, we had the opening act and he's the end act. Of all bands to have, the promoters had hired the Cannonball Adderley Quintet to play after Mahavishnu. No one's taking into consideration, because they just see the money, just the dollar signs. Cannonball, even this is with George Duke and
yeah, I was going to ask you.
And it's band's great, but it's a different kind of personality, man. And so you don't put them after us. I mean, when we finished playing, everybody left, and we had 2 shows to do.
Yeah.
And there was a line waiting outside, and we were just the opening act. Well, as it turned out, this next show, they came on before us, and so did the lead act, whomever it was. And he wouldn't touch anything until he got out of the way, because he wanted to be in the audience so he could hear what we were doing.
No, it changed the world. I mean, changed my life. I spoke to so many people that band and just changed everything, And I've often wondered, both you and John had come out of Miles Davis's group, and I think the fact that you played with Miles Davis sometimes gets eclipsed by Mahavishnu Orchestra. But what I mean, those sessions you were doing with John, and you also did sessions without John as well, didn't you? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what was that? What did you get from that experience with Miles Davis? I mean, this is one of the greatest musicians in history, isn't it? So
he was a great manager of bands on stage. Body language is a lot. He didn't talk a lot. Even without me, the stories abound about him when he came out of retirement at the beginning of the 80s, and he had in his band Blackbird McKnight on guitar, John Schofield on guitar, and somebody else on guitar. And then he had Marcus Miller, I think, was playing bass, and it just went on like this. So he had a bunch of guys at Philharmonic Hall. I think it was Man with a Horn or something like this. Next thing you know, he's standing there and he's watching, and he's playing, and he didn't like what the 2 guitar players were doing. So he took one guitar from the guitar player who wasn't playing and took it off of his body and walked over to the other guitar player who was playing a solo, stopped him, gave him the guitar from the other one, and walked off and gave the other guitar player that one, the old, and that I think it was in Schofield and Beckford, and they started just play something different because and with the guitar because they didn't know what to do with it. The only thing that they had in their hand that they could make happen was a pick, you know. And all of a sudden, it was a different approach, and they were so respectful of Miles. It wasn't about how dare you do this, you know. It could have been that way, but it wasn't. Another situation was rehearsal the night before for the Jack Johnson soundtrack. And it was very loose, not a lot of discipline as usual, just ideas. And at the end, he said to me, there's something that you were doing just now, groove, and I'd like to have that groove on tomorrow thing. He said, you remember what you just played? And okay. And I was, normally he doesn't talk to me. So I was like, shit, I got to remember what did he do? I don't remember it. He said, so I just don't remember. And somehow it went whoop. So when I went to the studio, sat down, and the first everything's set up, and Miles says after waiting a few minutes, I guess John started playing with shuffle, and it was just grooving, trying to stay warm, I guess, and it got so infectious. Michael Henderson just off the hook and started to get into it. And the next thing you know, my hands were moving and I was playing. And Miles came out and said, I told you guys not to play between sets. It takes. So we stopped. Now it's a game for John. Miles goes in 2-3 minutes, goes by, nothing. And John sighs silently. Henderson starts it. And he's not going to tell me when I can and cannot play, you know, and the rebel. So they start playing a little bit louder, and again my hand started moving. Next thing you know, I'm back into it again. Miles runs outside and points to the red light and said, "Red light," and we started playing. And what we did is what you heard on Jack Johnson. The music we were supposed to play is called Circling Around. And it came much later, elements of it. But it's not just Jack Johnson. There were a whole lot of other musicians on that record that I never even met, that came from years before. It was a compilation of a lot of different things. And it was, I mean, even Herbie Hancock coming inside the studio at the end, towards the session. This was a session that was supposed to be 3 hours long. It started at 10. It finished at 12:30. And the other, I should say 6 hours long. There was a second session. That was the mixing section. So they made a record in less than 6 hours time of only what we did, adding bits and pieces together for a wonderful soundtrack. And that's the only recording that I remember. When he came to me as we were playing, he said, there was this line that you played before. Can you do that again? And I started playing something. He said, that's not what you did before yesterday. And I said, He said, but I like it. Play that. You know, and yeah, that's just
it's almost, when you tell the story, it's almost like that he was able to create new music almost out of the respect for him that the musicians had, you know, incredible players in the room, but there was so much respect there. And then what Miles wants me to do, I'm not too sure.
But can you imagine if you have 5 keyboard players in the room. And those keyboard players are Chick Corea, Keith Jarrett, Joe Zavinu, uh, Larry Young, and then later in the day comes Herbie with groceries in his arm because he has to go home. I mean, he just wanted to stop, drop off records, and must play, you know. Everybody else stopped playing, let Herbie play. You know, they didn't have to, no one had to tell him not to play. Said, what are we going to play now? I mean, whatever I contribute, it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, and it was just that kind of thing. That was just the keyboard choir. Percussion, Ayrton Moreira, Badal Roy Chowdhury, Alirio Lima. Who else was playing percussion? Oh, and I think it was either Lenny White, Jack DeJohnette, or Tony and me. I mean, it was like the bass players, Harvey Brooks from Big Brother and the Holding Company, and Ron Carter, 2 bass players. I mean, it just went on like this, Steve Grossman on tenor, Benny Maupin on bass clarinet, it's like, who's going to play what? What note fits where? There's only but 12 notes on the chromatic scale. I mean, where are you going to put everything, And yet there's all this space. People only added what they needed, and it was amazing to be kind of a proverbial fly on the wall and experience that. So many lessons there, about sometimes showing abstaining from not doing anything because there wasn't anything needed to be done. It was already done, except be part of the audience and just be quiet. Why not, and listen. And maybe one note might come up, and you just put that note in there. That's it, to define the chord change or so. Done.
It's the meal in front of you again, isn't it? That's what you need. Billy, we've been talking for an hour and a half. I cannot believe the stuff we've covered, and it's been absolutely a wonderful experience. Thank you for doing this. I'm going to stop the recording now. And ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Billy Cobham.
Everybody goes one hand clapping, clap.